Thanks so much for chatting with me, Rob.
Oh, good. I'm glad to chat.
Is this the fourth in the what we would call the Bernardo series of plays, the
Yes,
Housekeeper?
It is. Dr. Bernardo's Children, Wounded Soldiers, Carmel, The Housekeeper, and Ian and I are working on the final one called The End, which will be the final one. But this is the fourth.
Okay, great. And what is the through line that would take us, say, from Dr. Bernardo's Children, your first play? It premiered in 2005, is that right?
2005, and then it was remounted in 2006.
And then we've done it before.
We did it again in 2014.
So what is the through line from Dr. Bernardo's Children for an audience to The Housekeeper?
Well, in the first play, you see the two Bernardo boys, Billy and Walter, as kids. And you also see Walter as an older man, probably in his 80s. You're introduced to those characters. In Wounded Soldiers, Walter wasn't part of that, but Billy was a young man fighting in the First World War. Both the characters were in the third play, which was set during the 1930s, Walter and Billy. Billy had come back, he was riding the rails, and he came back to Millbrook where Walter had a farm. And so The Housekeeper is set maybe 15 years after that, in the 1950s. Walter is a widower, and this woman comes to work for him as a housekeeper. Billy's not in the fourth play. Billy and Walter will both be in the fifth play at the end.
So are they kind of catching up with themselves because they were young boys? They were played by four actors in Dr. Bernardo's Children, two young boys, two older men, and now we're kind of almost catching up with them?
Yeah, we're almost
age-wise?
catching up with them. In the fifth play, we'll jump ahead of catching up,
Right.
because they're both in a long-term care facility.
Are you tracking your own life with these characters age-wise and your own journey, or is that not true?
It's partly true in a way, especially writing this last play, The End, because some of the issues in the play around dementia, around people being in care, are things that, Ian and I, my co-writer, we both talk about a lot because we're getting to that age ourselves. I think I'm a bit older than the Walter of the Housekeeper, but maybe when we started working on it, I was more his age. It had a bit to do with, I realized we did a reading of this play, The Housekeeper, and I think it was August of 2020 during the pandemic, because we would have probably produced this play 3 or 4 years ago, but everything's gotten backlogged because of the pandemic. So, yeah, I've jumped over Walter's. I'm still around, but I've jumped over Walter's housekeeper age.
Is there a reason you picked to set it in 55? It's 55 in Millbrook, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to thank Ben Olin, really, in a way, one of our volunteer actors from long ago, who's passed away. He talked to me about this phenomenon of women coming to work on farms for widowed farmers. That was quite a common occurrence. And from the way Ben talked, I had a feeling it was in the 50s more, in the 60s. Although, as I was driving here today, I thought, it's probably still happening. That whole kind of world of somebody from a different place coming to an established place where everybody knows everybody, and all of a sudden there's this unknown person there.
Yeah, we're talking about that in some of the writing for this season, both The Housekeeper and Wild Irish Geese are about people trying to start over in a new place, right? And whether they are accepted or what that journey is like. What are you most excited about in the play when you're starting to think? Because you're just weeks away, I could say days away from directing.
Well, I haven't directed a fourth line since 2019, which was Carmel, which is a precursor to this play. I tell you what I'm most excited about is working with actors. I'm most excited about having a group of artists to discover and play and put this thing together. I think it's a real privilege to be able to do that, and I really appreciate that.
Is there going to be sort of the music of the time, or what will be some of the signposts or signifiers of the 1950s for an audience?
Yeah, I think the costuming, obviously. Ian McLachlan has written 2 songs that are sung by the main character Eleanor throughout the play. There's a reference to Harry Belafonte because the main character Eleanor really likes Harry Belafonte, so I'm thinking of having some of that music during the intermission. So there may be some pre-show and intermission music to evoke the 50s musically. I'm thinking for the curtain call to use a more modern song by Jelly Roll. which is an odd choice, but there's a song I really like. I can't even remember the name of it now. It's on his album Beautifully Broken, but it's about someone kind of moving on, trying to struggle. I don't know if I'll get away with using that or not, but I'm going to try.
The character of Walter, when we last saw him, when you last directed in 2019 in Carmel, he lost his wife Abigail. But this play The Housekeeper can be taken as a standalone piece. You don't need to have seen all those other plays.
Not at all. The circumstances of Walter losing his wife are discussed at one point in the play in the second act, when he opens up a little bit about what's happened. But we really know from the beginning of the play, it's through his daughter Ruth, that the mother is not there and that she has passed, and yeah, it's a standalone play for sure.
And the character of Eleanor, I mean, I know you talked about this inspiration of widowers hiring young women to be housekeepers and hearing that story. But what are some of the things that intrigue you about the character of Eleanor?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked on the character, but Ian also has had a lot to do, Ian McLachlan, with developing this character, because she is somebody who wants to be a writer. She has a lot of progressive ideas. I can't even describe how exactly what we decided about this character, but as that character developed in the writing, and looking at the play now, I think it's a really, really strong, fascinating character. In fact, I would argue it's one of our most fully developed characters in any of the plays we've written in that Bernardo series. And it's character walking the line between the audience liking the person and having maybe questions about the person. I hope it falls on the side of them embracing this character, because she does say some things and believe some things that don't go along with the Millbrook of the 1950s. I hope Millbrook of the 2020s is a little more accepting of her.
You and Ian have been writing, collaborating together. Are you in your 5th decade of collaboration?
The first thing we collaborated on was an adaptation of Dickens' Christmas Carol in 1988. It was done at Market Hall as a fundraiser for Art Space. And then we worked together on Crow Hill, the telephone play, which was produced in 97, and then The Orchard in 98. And then we began, I guess since then, our work has been on all these Bernardo plays.
And how do you work together? How do you decide who writes what?
We sit together and talk, and we talk about the story, about the characters, but then we go away and we write scenes on our own, and then we bring them back together and read them to each other and discuss them and amend them. I'm just thinking of how it's working now for this play, The End. We have different residents in the seniors' home, so I would take this character, maybe Lola, and write a monologue for her, and then bring that in. And Ian would have written one for another character, maybe incorporating, in his case, a song into the scene. And then we'll bring them together. And when you do that, you start to lose track of who actually has written the scene in a way, because you're sharing them so much. So it doesn't tend to end up like a bunch of choppy things. It sort of ends up to feel like a piece, you know. That's why I had a problem with talking about Eleanor, because I know I've had input into it, and he's had input into it, and it's hard for me sometimes to separate out who's done what.
When you work with Ian, I am curious, so I ask this question in a roundabout way. You are a very voracious researcher. I think it's what's given such beautiful authenticity to all of your standalone work over the years, the Kevin Blazers and Winslow Dearborn, Welcome Death, and the list goes on and on of your canon of work, Rob. When you work together, is he as much of a researcher as you?
In a way, yeah. I'd say so, in a different way, and he pulls things sometimes from his own experience, you know, that he'll bring into. I don't like to talk about specifics, but with The End, you know, with the issues around dementia and with, you know,
caregiving a spouse or something.
Yes, that's something. So he's always been, or with the character wanting to be a writer, for example, and his own experience. He'll bring those experiences to the table all the time that really help me. And his own experience as a novelist, and how characters are portrayed in novels, it gives a depth to things, you know. So we're very different. We have a very different approach sometimes, and I think the mixture works well.
And you always direct the world premieres of your own shows here at Fourth Line Theatre.
I kind of think that's happened, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I think more or less.
What is that control piece, and not in a bad way control piece, but what is that piece about?
I guess it's just finishing the job in a way, that you start. And then once it's finished, because you've directed you've directed Crow Hill. I don't think I directed the first production of Crow Hill, did I?
Yes, didn't you?
Was it?
Oh, Susan Spicer.
Susan.
Yeah, but it's morphed into, I guess, so we can say it's morphed into you directing world premieres of all your shows.
I think in that play I had such a big role, an acting role, that I didn't end up directing.
Right, you've never maybe directed Crow Hill, right? Because of playing Doc Logie?
That's correct.
Possible? Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
But do you have a certain vision? Do you hear it in a certain way? Is that what directing it the first time is about, is ensuring it kind of gets to the stage the way you imagine it?
I guess so, because developing all the characters makes me want to continue to be involved in directing it. I think that's true. On the other hand, I haven't directed. I'm trying to think of. I'm sure I've directed other people's plays at the farm, but not many. If I think of the history of the company.
But because in the early days you wrote so many of the plays, just by necessity, that wouldn't have been necessarily possible, right? Because the vast majority of the plays were written by you or you.
I believe that I directed Devil and Joseph.
I think you did. I was just about to say that. Oh my gosh, this is like two old people.
We did two productions of it. This is 30 years ago.
I know. It's two old people talking about what happened when? What did we do?
See why I'm writing the end now, right?
With the end, do you ever think about going into a home and living in a home, or is it more still distanced, seeing other people?
Not at all. I mean, lots of talks about, we better get a bathroom downstairs with a walk-in shower. We better have, better get ready for that,
So the next step is sort of how to age in place as long as possible.
Right. I know a number of people actually, researching in this play about my old high school, who I've been speaking with, who are ex-teachers and principals who are in their late 80s and 90s still living at home. I don't know how people do it, but they seem to, and I guess it's just maybe the luck of the draw. I think the loss of independence is such a major issue. When people have to leave their home to go into a public, I know they're homes, they're like apartments, but they're still, in a way, you're exposed to kind of a public world that being in your own home, you're not. You don't have that same kind of feeling of privacy and having things the way you want them, when you want them.
Yeah, and for some people who are very, very social, I suppose there's an element of that that's nice, and then for people who are less social, that is more problematic.
Yeah, for sure. And yet, I must say, the end is it's a serious play, but it has a lot of comedy in it.
Right.
Because one has to have a sense of humor about this stuff.
Some of the best plays about serious topics have a lot of humor in them. It's a way of approaching.
Yeah.
Drew Hayden Taylor always talks about that with his work, right? How he can get a lot more serious topics covered when he's making light of things.
Yeah, I always like the serious base with humor above it to help us absorb it all.
A character like Walter, who now we're seeing he's in his early 60s.
Yeah.
Is that how?
Yeah.
And is he based on someone
in
real?
Fact, a tape came in the other day. I talked to his daughter in Janetville the other day, Historical Society meeting. He's largely based. Well, he's based on a number of people, but one of the main things he's based on is a gentleman named Sparky Green, Harold Green from Bethany, who came over as a young boy with another young boy came over at the same time, Dave Masters, another person we interviewed who lived near Bethany. They were both Bernardo boys, and they were friends in Bethany. And this program that's just been sent to me is him being reunited with a couple of his siblings in this old CTV program, Thrill of a Lifetime, I guess from the 80s. And when on the cover of the little DVD, there's a picture of Harold Green, and he looks like Kevin Bundy would look like in 20 years or 30 years. And I thought that was so wild. Kevin's the fellow who played Walter in the last production.
Yeah. Jay Davis is playing Walter this year, so excited.
Yep. No, it's very good. I'm very excited about the cast. Yeah, very excited.
And so then when you get, like, so you talk to Dave.
Yeah, I interviewed Dave Masters originally and his wife Ruby about another play we were doing, 2 Rounds in a Square, because he was part of the Galloway Orchestra from based in the Bethany area in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. And then when Ian and I started working on the first Bernardo play in 2003, I interviewed him again because the Bernardo subject had come up in talking with him, because that was a big part of his life. And he was an amazing, amazing man. And it was so easy to incorporate his whatever into a character.
His life force?
Yeah, his life force and just way of approaching things and talking about things into dialogue and script that Jeff Hewitson played so well.
Yeah.
He did it in 2005.
When we first did that show 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The Bernardo's Children. It's 20 years ago this year.
Right.
It's 20th anniversary of that show.
Right.
There were still some Bernardo children alive, but can you tell us about the home child movement quickly, Robert, and what happened?
Yeah, Dr. Thomas Bernardo went to London from Dublin to study to be a doctor in the 1860s, I believe, and he was based in the London Hospital, which is near an area in London that's quite poor. Stepney is one of the areas, and he noticed all these kids that didn't seem to have anywhere to go at night. They just seemed to sleep out in the streets and in rain barrels and things like that. So he started this thing with this one little shack where he started teaching them some stuff, and then that evolved into a residential kind of system that eventually evolved into an immigration system where these kids from England were then sent over to places like Australia, South Africa, and Canada to work on farms and to work in homes. And some of them were sent here at the age of 11, 12, 13 sort of thing. And many of them came on their own, had been separated from their siblings. Originally, they had been separated from a parent, and then they're separated from their siblings. So there's these different levels of separation, and then ergo trauma in a way. And some of them had great experiences when they came to Canada. Some of them had terrible experiences. Some of them had a mixture of those experiences. Harold Green, the character Walter's based on, had a really negative experience and then a positive experience. Right. And then I had no idea when we started working on the project how many people had that in their heritage. And I think it's like 1 out of 10 Caucasian Canadians.
They even say 1 out of 10 all Canadians
all
now.
Canadians have that kind of background. And when we were working on the play, we'd be asking, like Ian would be asking his students in his classes at Trent, or I'd be asking them about that connection. And a number of them would put up their hands and say, yes, my grandfather was, or my grandmother was. I don't know much about them. When we did the play, it was just this upsurge of interest in it. And I think when we did it the first year, it was sold out before it opened.
Okay.
And the second year, it was sold out again almost before it reopened. We did a reading early days down in Port Dover when we were developing the script, and people came from the States to listen to this reading, from Cleveland and different states that are, across the Lake Erie, because of that connection.
Because a lot of Bernardo kids sort of immigrated or moved around as they became older,
Yeah.
right? And they went to the States because of that prospect, I
Yeah.
suppose, that American concept of work hard and you can achieve your dreams.
Ivy Susi, who was the head of the Bernardo Hazelbrae group in Peterborough, very instrumental in getting that plaque on Bernardo Avenue with the names of all the girls who went through that home. She was very, very helpful. I attended meetings of their group for, I think, a number of years, and before, during, and after the production. I had a great amount of support from the community, steering me where to go to talk to who,
And in terms of a scheme like this, I mean, take orphans, quote unquote orphans, and take them off the streets of a big city, a big industrial city that was polluted and all what have you, and bring them to Canada, right, where the air is cleaner, where there's chance for them to. Was the thought to have them adopted, to have them live good lives, to be integrated? Like, what was the thinking of the scheme?
Well, I think certainly it was. On the other hand, there were so many over there that they needed to have an outlet. They needed to send them somewhere. They couldn't look after them all. I think that was partly behind it. And somehow, in the case of Canada, there was a feeling that Canada needed these people as part of the workforce. So that's how, because Canada had to accept them. If they didn't accept them, they wouldn't be going. So here's these young people that can work and help build your country, and it'll give them a better life. And then there were cases where the kids were almost adopted, in some cases inherited property and farms. Other cases they were treated like, in Ivy Susie's case of her father, he wasn't even allowed in the house, and he was fed almost like an animal in the barn. And some of the people maybe that were uppity people that thought, oh, we can have this servant in our house. I don't think they had the administration and the bureaucracy strong enough to adequately monitor how these kids were doing. I think in some cases they were treated horribly.
And so let's leave it on a bit of a higher note than that. I asked that question. That took us down a dark place, understandably.
It was a stigma. You know, we have a funny accent. Some Canadians didn't want them here. What are they doing taking our jobs? But I learned working with the Hazelbrae group in Ivy that was shifting from that to a pride that they had that heritage. So people became proud and wanted to talk about being Bernardo children rather than hiding the fact. Although Walter is a character we learned in the first play, hasn't even told his daughter and his granddaughter about it. You know, he's hidden it from his own family, and that was very true. That happened. Mm-hmm. People married people who had been Bernardo children and never even heard during their whole lifetime that never even knew they were until after they passed sometimes.
With a character like Walter, now you named him Walter White before Breaking Bad ever came out. That's right.
Fortunately, I didn't. Yeah, Walter White of Bernardo's predates Walter White of Breaking Bad.
I love that.
For the record.
Just for the record. You came up with it first, you guys.
Yeah. Walter's a great name. It's an old country name.
I know you don't hear it much anymore.
Our neighbor was Walter. But actually, my wife Jeanette's Jadek from Poland his name was Walter. I hope people want to come and see it. I think it's going to be I think the stakes are very high in this play for all the characters. What they're going through. In a way, the play is about love, and it's about people's place in the world, and it should be, like I said, it should be a rich experience play to attend.
Great, thanks, Rob.
Thank you.